In this session, we're going to be looking at the important subject of communication, talking and listening to our children. As adults, if we think about what it feels like to be listened to by a husband or a wife or a friend, we probably come up with words like valued and special. And we have the power to make our children feel valued and special just by listening to them. As a parent, when life is busy and we're juggling all the different demands on our time, it can be hard sometimes to stop and to make time to listen to our children. And I think that's because we see things through adult eyes. So we think that putting on the next load of washing or answering that email or making that phone call are more important than listening to our children when they're telling us about the Lego helicopter or the friend's new hair braid or the dive that they've just learnt to do in the swimming pool. I know so often I haven't given our children my full attention. I remember one time we were sitting around the kitchen table at home and my daughter was trying to tell me a long story about a film that she'd seen at a friend's house. And next to me was a magazine with a very interesting article in it. And although I was nodding at her, half an eye was on this magazine. And halfway through the conversation, she just said to me, "Mummy, you're not listening." And I said, "I am listening." And she said, "No, you're not. You're not looking at me. You need to listen with your eyes." And she was right. So often I have pressed on with doing the next job and not really spent time listening to what our children are wanting to say. And it's good to listen not just to the words, but to the feelings behind the words. Our children sometimes find it hard to express what they feel. And communication is a two-way process. As well as listening, it involves talking. Our words have incredible power. The children's rhyme, "Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me." It's just not true. Most of us can remember very easily hurtful things that have been said to us. Words have the power to build us up or to pull us down. And that's what this session is all about, talking and listening to our children. In short, communication.
I think that's the basis, isn't it? The basic of being a parent. Listen and talking to your kid.
If you don't have communication, then you can't tell someone how you feel or how they feel, or you can't understand really.
To understand what they're going through, how they're feeling. If you don't speak to them, then you don't really know what's going on with them.
Where else would they get to be heard if not at home?
Some people don't have anyone else to turn to, so that it's family, they should always be there.
Kids need your time.
If you're really busy and you've got your mind on something else, it's easy to not listen to children.
Parents don't understand what their kids have to say most of the times because their understanding levels are different.
Sometimes children have got worries and they tell you about them at the most unexpected time.
Our ideas, what we see as a norm, is probably not their ideas, and we just have to try and understand them more.
If you don't talk to them when they're young, then how do they understand how things work?
Making them so that they're comfortable with you from a young age will help you out when they're older, because then they'll be comfortable to talk to you and come to you about the problems.
The list is endless for the ways in which it benefits them. Yes.
Yes.
And you agree, don't you?
Indeed.
Dad, I've got football practice at 4.
All right, buddy.
Oh, don't forget to walk the dog.
Okay.
Daddy, don't forget to book the hairdressers.
Hi, Dad.
Where's your dad?
No.
Oh no.
How well do we communicate with them?
Sometimes better than others.
That's not my strength always. If I'm tired, my communication can just be, pick up your toys, if I'm honest.
I think sometimes we just toss words into the air, and you might as well not speak. Because if they're watching TV or busy or absorbed in a book,
or
they
Lego.
don't hear a single word you say, do they? So sometimes I get it really wrong, and I think I've communicated, but I might as well not have spoken a word.
We've been trying quite hard to communicate with him as he is getting to the stage where he can communicate back. So when he's doing something we don't really want him to do, or trying to encourage him to do something else, we try very hard to get his attention and make sure he knows that we're talking directly to him. So we are working on that, but we're kind of learning that as we go along, I guess, because as he develops, we're learning better ways to do it.
I mean, even at his little age, just listening to what he's got to say, which is a lot, but it's very repetitive. But just trying to give him space and time, in all of our lives, really.
Yes, I think she can talk to me about anything at the moment. I imagine when she gets older, there are going to be things that she won't want to discuss with me.
I would hope that they can talk to us about anything. I'm sure there are certain things, maybe boys for Jessica or girls for the boys that they probably wouldn't want to talk to us about. But I think if it was anything serious, I would really hope and pray that they'd feel able to, talk it through with us.
I don't tell them everything, but I tell them most things.
Not everything, but sometimes when they're just calmed down, you can tell them about quite a lot of stuff.
Well, I hope the children can talk to us about anything, but you don't always know necessarily what's on their minds or what's going on. But I think I'd hope that I was open enough for them to be able to talk to me or talk to Chris about anything that was worrying them.
Sometimes when you're angry about something they've said or something, and they ask you what's the matter, you find it hard to tell them because they could get angry.
I think there's some things that you would find difficult to talk about, and some things that you'd find easier to talk about.
I think the time that the kids want to talk the most is at bedtime. You've said goodnight and then suddenly they'll ask you a question just as you're about to leave the room, or they'll hit you with something really deep and you think, oh my goodness, I can't just leave this. You have to see it through. But and that's really tricky because that's normally the time of the day when you're thinking, okay, I'm ready for some me time now. I'm ready for some quiet. And it's a bit of a battle sometimes.
Sometimes you can be cynical and thinking this is a delay tactic. They're just about to go out the door, so let's keep them talking. But some of those conversations at the same time prove to be really, really meaningful and really deep.
And I quite like making Cian's breakfast in the kitchen because I can hear them both chatting away upstairs, and Cian's quite often then breaks into song and they're kind of doing the actions together while changing him. So it's quite nice sitting downstairs and hearing that interaction going on every morning.
What have you got?
Generally, I like doing things with the kids, so we'll be out camping quite a lot, and random conversations can come up then, and it kind of takes you off guard because you suddenly realise they're a little bit further along than you thought they were.
I mean, I'm not sure there is a best time to talk to the children. I think it's whenever they want to talk to you kind of thing. But I think definitely if something's important, it's making sure there's no distractions and that you actually have the time to spend to talk to them.
The best time is when they're not busy or not stressed, and when they're relaxed and calm.
It depends on the children as well a lot, because you can't just think, oh, let's just sit down and have a little chat, because they might not want to sit still or they're not in the mood, or you try and ask them questions and they just say yes, no, whatever. So sometimes you've got to wait until it comes from them, until they start talking to you about something or asking you questions, and you've almost just got to seize the moment every now and then.
Yeah, I think a good time to talk to children is over mealtime, and I think we try and do that. You know, you're fresh in from the day, and it's quite a good time just to download and talk about what's happened, or what's gone well, what could have gone better.
We don't always manage to fit it in or remember to do it.
I'm back from work in time.
Yeah, but we do try and do that.
I either want to get home straight away, so if it's bad I can get it over with, or at night time, because that's just when I feel that I can talk to them about things.
I think after tea, because it's kind of when the day's finished, so they're not rushing around doing anything, or like they're not stressed about anything. So it's, yeah, that's a good time to tell them.
I think the best time to tell your mum and dad about something is when you go to bed, and it's just because it's a new start. Well, like
next day.
Yeah, it's a new start the next day. Yeah.
If we want to kind of talk with them, I think the best time is just before bed. They're kind of in bed, they can't move, they can't run off and do something, and I think they don't particularly want the light to go off. They don't want the day to be over, so they're quite happy then to kind of chatter away. And it's almost trying to contain that, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's kind of, I think, a good time when they just open up about their day.
All the time. She likes to talk all the time, don't you? Because it's just...
I like being a chatterbox.
You are a chatterbox. Because it's just us, she doesn't really have anybody else to talk to, so it's kind of me. And, yeah.
The cats.
And the cats. Do you talk to the cats?
Yeah.
Oh, it's me and the cats.
I like to think we do listen to them. We probably tell them more things than listen.
When they're watching TV, sometimes they're focused on the TV so much, they're like, yeah, and don't really listen.
Listening is one thing I'd love to be able to do better. And it's actually one of my biggest regrets in terms of parenting, because there are times when your head is just so full of conversations and processing stuff and what's been happening in the day, that you're on that more than you're actually listening to them talk.
They have to be looking at you, and sometimes my dad, when he's on Jessica's laptop, he just goes like this, yeah.
Sometimes it's quite incessant, and I can switch off, and sometimes I get shouted at that I'm not being listened to, that she's not being listened to, at which point I start listening again.
I find it really difficult to listen to the boys when they're talking about something that they're interested in, because the fact that they're children means that they're interested in things that generally I'm not that interested in.
The things I like to talk about are what's going to happen in Doctor Who next.
The boys mainly like to talk to us about computer games, where they are on a game.
Pokemon, like Pikachu and Dratini and Croconaw and Graveler and Geodude.
Sounds like a foreign language. It's
does to me anyway.
Dragonair and Dragonite, Totodile, Bayleaf, Chikorita, Weedle and Beedrill and Kakuna. Done.
Oh, you show interest, but you don't understand what they're talking about.
No.
Yeah, I just kind of think I just need a bit of quiet. And if that's when they're kind of trying to tell you something, it is really difficult to listen. And I think sometimes I probably just nod, and I think they probably know Mum's not really listening.
We've got two boys who are 10 and 8 and a little girl who is 5. Listening to your children can be quite a challenge, and making space to do that properly, especially after a busy day. I come in from work and there's a whole load of things still going through my mind, hangovers from things you're dealing with in the day that are still bothering you. You might be sitting near them, you may even be asking them questions, but your mind isn't really engaged. And I think that's even more of a danger with phones, with emails on them. You know, you don't just close the door in the office and say goodbye. The office kind of travels with you, and the issues travel with you often. It was a Saturday morning, and I think an email had come through on my smartphone from work, and it's always going, it never stops. And I was looking at it on my phone, and I could hear my son asking me a question about, I think it was about whether he could go out to the park. And I heard it, but I didn't respond. I wasn't really listening. And then after I'd done that email, I think I got drawn into Facebook or Twitter. And he asked me this question a couple of times, and I said, I won't be a second, I'm just doing this. And when he asked me again, I snapped back and I said, can't you see I'm busy? And the thing he replied that really woke me up, really, he said, you're a nicer person without your iPhone. And that really stopped me in my tracks. It really turned it off. It is really hard to understand, especially some of their fears. I think that's what strikes me. Our children have had a thing about going upstairs by themselves, as you can imagine. If there's a massive panic because they realise they're upstairs by themselves, it's quite difficult. But just saying it's irrational and telling them off isn't working. That doesn't help. We've got 3 children, and when they each want to talk, they all be quite different. One of my children just loves going for a walk. He really likes walking and talking. My other child would hate that, really. That's not what they're into. They really want to do something very practical. And yet a lot of good conversations can come off the back of doing something together. So I think I've really got to understand that, and hopefully, you understand them when they're little, and you can carry on understanding them as they get older, and not just be miles apart by the time they're adults.
We're joined in this session by Mark Chester, who is the author of Who Let the Dads Out. And Mark, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
And we're talking about the really important subject of communication, talking and listening with our children. In the story we heard earlier from that dad, Mark, I think he made some really important points on this subject. So what were some of the things maybe that struck you most from what he said?
Yes, it was very moving, wasn't it, what he shared, and I could really identify with what he said, because I've commuted to work for many years, and I've gone out early in the morning, come back late at night, and I wasn't always present with my children a lot. Things have changed, and now I'm working at home. And part of that is being present more with my children, being around them more, spending more time with them, being able to communicate more with them. But what I've learnt is, even though I'm present, I'm not always available. So I'm not always giving them my attention. And I really have to work hard to do that, to be available to them, to give them my attention, to listen to them and to talk to them.
Yeah, it was really interesting, wasn't it? I thought it was a fascinating comment. You're a nicer person without your iPhone. And this idea that we're in the same room with them, but actually we're somewhere else in our hearts and our minds, and I think kids find that hard.
Yeah, and one of the things that does distract our attention is often electronic devices. We can respond to them as if they're going to be hurt or disappointed or angry or sad if we don't immediately meet their needs. But the thing about electronic devices is, of course, they don't have feelings. Our children do have feelings, but for some reason we often find it more of a struggle to respond with the same enthusiasm to them.
And it can be so subtle, I think, can't it? I think I just answer a text, and then before I know where I am, I'm into emails. And I thought what I would try and do was I would do my emails and catch up on them when the children were doing their homework. And so I'd start off and they'd be doing their homework, and then they'd finish, and I would still be there ages later, still doing my emails. And one of them said to me once, "Mummy, your homework seems to take a lot longer than ours does." And actually, I just needed to choose to stop.
Yeah, but it's not just about the technology, is it? When my children were young, we didn't have, iPads and iPhones and all that stuff. But I remember once I'm sat in a chair reading some report or something from the office, and my daughter had been trying to get my attention for about 20 minutes. And finally, in sheer frustration, she got a little stool, stood on it, tapped me on the forehead and said, "Hello, is anybody in there?" So it's not just a modern thing, is it?
And when they're little, I think the whole kind of getting down to their level, giving them eye contact, helping them really feel that we value them and that they're important, that's so important in terms of how we communicate with them, I think.
Yeah, even before my daughter could talk, I remember I used to play a little game with her, and I'd get a plastic toy and I'd pretend it was a microphone, and I'd interview her with the microphone. So I'd say things like, "How was your day?" And then she'd make some noises, and then I'd ask another question. And she couldn't speak, but actually I was making eye contact, and she was making noises and I'd respond to those noises. So even when children are really, really young, we can still communicate with them in that way, can't we, and listen to them.
And I'll tell you what I think is important, that we model communication. If we're feeling a bit fed up or a bit down, it's not the end of the world to say, even to quite a young child, Mummy's a bit sad today over something or other, and they see us struggling to share our hearts, and they learn how to do that.
Yeah, and we have to give them that opportunity to speak, don't we? I know when my children were little, I'd often ask them a question, and really what I wanted was a one-word answer. So I might say to my daughter, "How was your day at school?" And she'd start off by saying, "Well," and then I knew it was going to be a long answer, and my heart would sink. But the ironic thing is, now they're a bit older, I often ask them, "How was your day at school?" And I get one word answer, "Fine." And I really want to know more. You know, I really do want to know more at this stage. So we've got to take the opportunity to listen to our children when they want to speak, not just when we want to listen.
It was a big light bulb moment for me when I realised I almost had to be intentional sometimes. To be honest, talking to kids sometimes can be a bit boring, can't it? You know, it can be a bit boring, and you have to really, really make an effort to do it, but it's worth it.
Yeah, and sometimes that gets different, doesn't it, as they get older. So sometimes they might not want to sit face to face and talk. You know, I know with my son, often it's about doing something together, and while we're doing it together, then he'll talk. So we might be in the car driving somewhere, or we might be washing the dishes or making something in the kitchen alongside one another, and then he'll just open up and begin to talk.
Meal times, I think, are also really, really good opportunities for that, aren't they? You know, if we can make time to sit down, it can be hard and people have got, you know, busy lives, but even if it's just, you know, once a week, sitting down together as a family, that provides a wonderful time for connection and communication. We used to do a little thing at meal times called high-low, and we used to just say to the kids, what's your high or what's your low of the day or the month or whatever, and quite often they wouldn't want to cooperate at all, but just now and then we'd find out something that had happened in the playground or something that happened at school that I don't think otherwise we'd have found out about.
And one of the things I've found is that we need to follow up on our promises as well, don't we? So if we say, well, I can't talk to you now, but we'll have a chat after tea, we need to make that time available. We need to make sure they know, if my mum or my dad or whoever says to me, we're going to speak later, we will get an opportunity to speak later.
And it's often, isn't it, trying to listen behind almost what they're saying, listening to the emotion, listening to their feelings as they get older, but even when they're small. I remember one time one of our children didn't want to go to school, and he pretended that he'd been sick, so he got a whole load of muesli and chucked it down the loo. And I have to say, I was convinced. And then I realised he wasn't ill, so I was mad with him. And I got cross with him and sent him off to school. And it wasn't really till quite a long time later, when I really took time to listen to him, that I found out the problem was that he didn't want to go swimming, and he was in a swimming class that was too difficult for him, and he was scared, and that's why he didn't want to go to school. But I hadn't taken that time then to listen.
Yeah, and then even if we know what they're scared of, we can sometimes be quite dismissive of that, as we heard earlier from the dad who spoke. And, you know, but as adults, we're all afraid of different things. We've all got different concerns. You know, I might be afraid of heights. You might be afraid of flying, Catherine, or Rob might be afraid of spiders. We're all different, and we seem to often be able to accept that with adults, but we also need to accept that with our children, don't we? And to acknowledge their fears and say it's okay to be concerned about something or worried or scared.
And I think it's pretty easy to go on a guilt trip in all this communication thing. You know, I spend quite a lot of time talking to mums and dads who don't live with their children. And so often they're weighed down with guilt. They'll say to me, I really try and communicate with the kids when I see them, but it's so hard. You know, and I say to them, just listen as much as you can. The message you're trying to give is, when you're ready to talk, I'll be there for you.
So Mark, out of all the things that we've been talking about, what would be the one thing that you would like to say to parents? What would be your top tip for building families where we have great communication?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's fantastic to spend time with our children, isn't it? But sometimes we have to just stop, put aside all distractions. We need to listen to them, talk to them. We need to give them our full attention, and they need to know that we're giving them our full attention.
Brilliant. Well, we've discovered that communication is foundational to building strong relationships with our children. But as parents, with all the different demands upon our time, that can be really challenging. So we can grab opportunities during the everyday things of family life. So story time, bath time, in the car, especially at meal times. But we also can be intentional. So we can go out for an ice cream or for breakfast or for fish and chips. We can sit down and do Lego together or make biscuits. And we need to remember the impact of the words that we say. When our daughter was 9 and at school, she kept on wanting to do different activities. So there was recorder and drama and judo and a host of other things. But after a couple of weeks, she'd always want to stop. And I wanted to teach her a bit of a life lesson. And I said to her, you need to stick at things, don't quit. Well, that was about 10 years ago, and she reminded me of it recently. And what she told me was, instead of the encouragement to keep going, which is what I had intended, what she'd heard was, you are a quitter. And that was about her character rather than about her behaviour. And there are times that we will need to speak firmly to our children. But if we can learn to listen to them and to speak positive, kind and affirming words to them, then the chances are that they will learn to listen and speak those kind and affirming and positive words in return. So communication is vitally important, and I have a hunch that if we listen to our children when they're 5, 6 and 7, then when they're 15, 16 and 17, just maybe, they will listen to us.